All right, welcome to the Aeon of the Daughter. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, of course, that is also true. But welcome to the Grey Lodge, Aeon of Psychic Youth, Arc Null. I'm Jin the Ninja. I host a show called Threshold Saints, and this is a collaborative, speculative, Gnostic space. It's a plus ultra space, so we believe magic is real. We take that as a foundation stone to which to have our collaborative and magical discussions, because everything happens in synthesis as well as perception. So it doesn't happen without an audience, and it certainly doesn't happen without my two amazing co-hosts. Matt Murrah is traveling today for work, so he cannot be with us, and I did set the space extra early for myself because I am driving into the city in a few hours. So the last space of the spring, and when we return, well, next week, Matt will be the co-host, and Matt and Joshua will both be the co-hosts. So please, and if Solar comes, he will obviously also be the co-host, and he is the co-host anyway. But if he comes, please treat the three of them with as much respect as you would extend to me, and they are the in charge, okay? And Matt has special instructions, and Solar knows what I like, and Joshua's cool. So even if it's an interesting space, or it will be generative in its own way. Okay, so I just want to say that little house cleaning, I guess, as they say in the podcast world. And so let me just do a quick room introduction as well as co-host. So co-host goes first. So we have Solar, Exile, our Kabbalah, Buddhist, magic, everything. He's just a wealth of knowledge. Extremely, I care about him a lot, just simply because since he's been in my orbit, he has proved to be a generative and very supportive person. So thank you very much, Solar, and I'll let you introduce yourself, of course, after. Joshua, my buddy. It's Joshua the Branch, who is an amazing podcaster, very innovative, interesting thinker, and works with a lot of different people, and is constantly weaving and looking for new connections to kind of build the world, or the world mythos, the mythopoesis of the world, I guess we'll say, outward, and expand it as much as it is possible. Of course, we have Avi, our Dakini queen, and thank you so much, Avi. She's been to every single space. Aeon of the Daughter, welcome to Hapaboria, Friday Night Gnostic Mass. I see you, I recognize you, I appreciate you, and thank you so much. Of course, we have Cassandra, who is our honorary lodge member. We love Cassandra. She is a tarot. She does Kabbalah. She's a Gnostic. She does jewelry. She's a content creator. She has wonderful. She posts beautiful images. I was particularly captured by the things that she's been posting today, and I always like Cassandra, even if we don't always agree. But I can accept that because I just feel like we have a deeper understanding. So thank you so much, Cassandra, and welcome. And Pookie, thank you for coming. I don't know who you are. However, you're welcome to be here, and just know that this is a speculative Gnostic space. We're going to be talking about magic. We're going to be talking about history. We're going to be talking about just speculative ideas on America. But as I said, because this is a special space, because I will be on vacation next week, there still will be a space. Just to be clear, there will be a space, but I won't be hosting it. But today is a synthesis, maybe a collabo between two of ideas that I kind of generated, but as a group, as the Grey Lodge, we have all contributed to. So every single person, especially the co-hosts, but also the people in the lodge, and also especially maybe the listeners. So it is Aeon of the Daughter X. Welcome to Hapaboria. Sorry, I almost forgot the title of my own fucking series. Okay, so it's a blend. We're blending it tonight. We're gonna free range it a little bit, but it still will be in keeping with Welcome to Hapaboria. So what is Welcome to Hapaboria? Welcome to Hapaboria is about speculative American religion, speculative American Gnosticism, and speculative American magic. So it's not just about the Mormons. It has a lot to do with Dharma. It has a lot to do with the land, geo-ontological relationships, understanding like if you want to call them, I'll use a Dharmic term, yakshas that are dwell here. I think that that's a good way to understand it. Geo-regional animism. I think that's an interesting idea, and I also think the axial. That we live in an axial system. So obviously that is my orientation. So I obviously think that America, the new world, maybe America broadly, is the world island. That's just I'm just saying it speculatively. You can believe it or not believe it. That's totally okay. But we're exploring the idea. So, and what is Aeon of the Daughter? Aeon of the Daughter is a crazy idea that I had, or whatever, however you want to describe it. I generated it, and it was building off of other things that already existed in Talima, in Srividya, in Kalachakra, um, in Gnosticism, obviously, like OG Gnosticism, like real Gnostic texts, not just Nag Hammadi. So it's building off of those kinds of ideas, and obviously, lately, my interest has been in Mary Magdalene and the Grail lore. Now, you might think, Jin, you're a Buddhist. Why are you posting Mary Magdalene? Well, because I also think that Mary Magdalene can be, maybe even if she's simply a vessel for the idea of Nuria, that's okay with me. I think it's an interesting idea to explore. So, Aeon of the Daughter is about the wheel turning. It's about the axis shifting. It's the 4 and the 5 rectified in the 9. So Hesed, Gevurah, Yesod, you guys all know. So that's basically what Aeon of the Daughter is. It's the idea of who the Aeon is. And this Aeon, in my opinion, I believe it. You don't have to believe it. Of course, it's only speculative, but I'm all in. So there's 3 main Aeons in this formulation. And so it's Nuria, who is love as the cause of knowledge. Then you also have Seth, who is the adamantine son, also known as Shem. And then you also have Zoe, who is the invisible life force. So basically, we have explored Nuria because I think Nuria is the primary Aeon of this age. And I think that's what this space will also be about, in the sense that it is the Aeon of Psychic Youth. Because as we said, what is the Aeon of the Daughter? The Aeon of the Daughter is a synthesis between the right and left hands. It's a synthesis of the texts. It's non-dual knowledge. It's non-dual gnosis. It's looking at the text speculatively without preconception. And it is also approaching them and discarding what is no longer useful, and taking those generative seeds, those bijas, into the future, whatever that may be. It's also about meta reality, applying your will not only to the timeline, but also to your life, because your life is your great work for everyone. This is true for everyone. It's not about spells, it's not about anything else. So okay, so I'll let the boys introduce themselves, and we'll go. I'll riff off that, and we'll go. So Solar, please go, and then Joshua.
Hey, happy to be here as always. I feel like I'm getting less interesting over time, insofar as I'm really just kind of drilling down on my Dzogchen practice, right? Which has been very fruitful for me, but in some ways it makes me less sort of eclectic. So I'm sort of dialed in right now and have been for a little while. Still kind of a weird dude, I suppose. Also, shout out to Pookie, is a longtime mutual of mine. I have a very low tolerance for horniness on my timeline. So Pookie's the one guy, like he gets the pass, like in my entire list of mutuals. He also makes it slightly dangerous for me to open my Twitter app in public, which I really appreciate. It keeps me off my phone. So yeah, shout out to Pookie. Happy you're here, man.
Yeah, shout out to Pookie. Okay, Joshua, please go ahead.
Hey guys, it's a pleasure to be here. It's a beautiful day here in Appalachia, and I'm very happy to be sharing the perspective. And I was thinking of some things too that might relate to that. So, again, thanks for being here with us, and pleasure to be here co-hosting. Thank you.
Joshua, you can totally plug anything you want to plug. It's like a plug. This is the time. Like, you want to plug now? Plug now. Plug anything you want to plug, and I'll also give you opportunity to do it at the end. Just because you have had so many shows in the last couple of weeks, I think it's important that you put your work out there. And if you want to take the opportunity, please do.
Oh, yeah, certainly. Well, the most pertinent would be the cross symbolism video. We did a video with Mario Garza from Symbolic Studies on the King of Cups channel, and it's pretty good. There's a lot of shorts made from it too, so if you don't want to sit and watch a long form thing, you might be able to find one of the smaller ones that you like. We'll be doing a Messiah archetype recording sometime around Father's Day. It's probably going to be a live or something like that, I guess. And then we'll be doing a King and Branch episode where we cover like politics, current events. My perspective is from the lens of biblical prophecy, and then King offers like a pop culture, media, cinematic kind of thing to it. So, and then jointly we sometimes do God as a Playwright as a series. So, if any of those things sound interesting, check them out. And thank you again for letting me be here.
Of course, Joshua. Also, I do also recommend the King of Cups channel. I like Chris a lot, and he is a very good researcher. And also, oh, hello, BD. Oh, there we have BD. I didn't even see you. Okay, sorry, BD. So we have BD in the house. Obviously, I do room shout outs. So BD Salerno, the twice a saint. And hopefully again very soon doing well, I won't say, but something really interesting that I think people will like, and also something interesting that I'm interested in. But BD has just released a brand new book on, I think she actually has two new books, but she has one on astral bodies and asteroids. So that was obviously the subject of our. Oh, there we have Dapper Zan. So, hey, Zan. I'll also introduce you in a second. Okay, so BD did 2 episodes on my show, and we kind of did a Lana Del Rey 1 and 2. But it's not just about that. It's also about, there's like a little Edward Casey lore. There is. We did lots of things. I mean, we really discussed astrology, but I obviously, because I'm not an astrologer, I discuss it from my own sort of tantric astrology angle. It's not quite Jyotish, but it's definitely using the language of Jyotisha. So, so everybody check out BD. She has her own channel now, and yeah, she's definitely deserving of your subs if you're interested in any of the things she talks about. So thank you, BD. Dapper Zan. So Dapper Zan is a content creator of his own, musician, poet, cool dude. Thank you, Zan, for so much for coming. Obviously, you're a lodge member, and we always appreciate you because these spaces happen in synthesis, they happen in perception, and they happen in consent. So, obviously, this is kind of a magic space. So, I will begin by perhaps reading, as I have done the last few spaces, some Gnostic remixed prayers, we'll call them, which I do have actually open today. So, I thought we could read a little bit from Scion of Nuria, and then maybe that could help generate some of the things that we're going to talk about, at least for me. And if the boys want to talk about something else, they can talk about something else. And if they want to riff, they can riff. And I also want to say solar. I actually think Dzogchen makes you more interesting simply because, well, I don't know like what kind of yoga you're doing, but I can say from experience that many of the dakinis practice in Dzogchen. Now, I know you're not particularly doing that, but sometimes they just appear, are very interesting, and Kurkula is a protector of Dzogchen for the Sakya school. So, interesting, and it makes her triply important because she is, as we talked about in the Aeon of the Daughter series, she goes all the way up from 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 Dakini on the carnal ground all the way up to Mother of the Buddhas. So a very interesting and figure who has a lot of potential, we'll say, in this Aeon. Okay, so here we go. She raised her bow and cast fire as an arrow upon the ark, setting the vessel ablaze. Her great work of defiance filled the worlds with spectral light so named. He who is the dragon of the word, his will to serve the maiden and her cause, that which is love. So that's obviously a semi-Jin original mixed with some actual epinoia of Nuria. Obviously, I always keep to the themes of the Gnostic text, but I like to perhaps remix them in my own way. Okay, last one. Maiden of the Chalice, she who wields the key, a girl within the crystal palace, who with love raises up the tree, unburdened by the words of that which has been, the knowledge of the name which is the cause of sin. Scion of Nuria. Something to think about. Okay. Yes, Joshua, please go ahead. Oh, let me just give Mr. John his shout out. So we have Space Answered in the house. Our other Astro. We've got so many, and but obviously we love John because he is always available, pretty much, and he always is a shoulder to either cry or complain on, and he accepts it. So thank you, John. And if anyone would like a reading from John, please contact him. But obviously pay him first. And that goes for Zen, BD, and Cassandra. Don't just ask people for things, treat it reciprocally. Treat it like how you'd want to be treated. I know everybody in our lodge is good like that, but you just never know. But I do encourage you, if you want services, go, to one of the, I don't want to call them folks. Folks is the wrong word. One of the Nagas who offers them. That's the right word. So there you go. Okay. So, Aeon of Psychic Youth. Well, what is the Aeon of Psychic Youth? The Aeon of Psychic Youth is obviously an extension of the idea of the pink ray and the Aeon of the Daughter, and what is. I've always said you have to lean in or dance with the Aeon. So whatever the Aeon is, if you don't believe the Aeon of the Daughter, that's okay. Just whatever the Aeon is that you think it is, you have to lean into that, I think. So I think it's a daughter, so I'm saying lean into that. She's dancing, so you should be dancing. You should be on the middle pillar because she's on the middle pillar. And pink is also on the middle pillar. So that's pretty much my orientation in that way. And she is the goddess of magic, in one way of saying. You could absolutely explain it in that way. So we have. I'm so glad that we're getting. We have so many cool people popping up. There we have Mookie. So okay, so we have to keep going. Moonblade. So we have Moonblade, who is our sick brother. He's a lodge member now, and welcome. Obviously, amazing, great mutual who I often retweet and quote tweet, and just a credible source of knowledge. And someone I actually would consider like my friend, who is a mutual, but we don't actually speak privately, which is fine. But I feel like we kind of know each other, and we're both obviously Hapaboreans, so that does make a difference. So, and then we also, of course, have Mookie, who is our Crow Dakini from the lodge, coming to us from the bowels of Western Europe. Thank you so much, Mookie. We appreciate you, and I'm so glad to see you here. Okay, Solar, yes, please go ahead.
I can't believe I never asked you this before, actually, when you were doing the Aeon of the Daughter series, like proper, right? For the first time. Did you ever lay down an Aeonic word or bija associated with Aeon of the Daughter? I was just curious.
Well, I'm very careful about. I've never said a bija on recording ever. Maybe I've said Oma home. Maybe that's probably it. But for Kurkula, I'll give you the bija. The bija for her is Hrim. It's the bija of the earth. It's the generative bija. It's the bija of fire and flowers. So obviously we've discussed that a lot. We've discussed like flux and how flux and fire transform, how there's a relationship between Gebra and Chokmah, how everything's rectified at Yesod. I mean, you know all this, Solar, so I won't repeat it for you. But for people who are listening, yeah, it is. It's a bija of it has a quality of earthiness, but it's not really of the earth. It's really of the flower. So it's really of life. It really has much more to do with that five-petaled, whether you want to say that's a rose or a mallow or hibiscus. That's really what it's about. It's really the generative force. So it can't really just be earth. It has to be something more, especially because she is a Dakini of the Western Garden, right? The Western Carnal Ground. She faces east. That's her special power. She faces east with her bow and arrow and points it at the blazing sun of 10,000 fires, or 10,000 star rubies, you could even say. That is a tantric way to describe it. I'm just saying. Crowley knew what he was talking about in a way. I'm not saying he totally got it right, but he did know something. Yes, Joshua, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So when you were reading the first Gnostic prayer concerning the woman and the dragon, I couldn't help but be reminded of that recent, what was it, in late April, when Venus and Saturn kind of framed the moon and made a smiley face. I was just wondering, I thought, wow, that's a very timely example to use, because it kind of felt like astrologically, does that correspond at all, maybe kind of to that same energy?
So if I'll describe it like this in shorthand, and if you want to hear me like full stream of consciousness, like just going for hours, like really ready, really prepped, go listen to those spaces, because I actually think that I did, like, there was something really interesting there. I'm not saying it was all me. It wasn't all me. It was generative. It was through the space. It was through the lodge. So obviously happened in synthesis, but there were some of those spaces were quite fruitful, we'll say. Maybe magical, maybe Kabbalistic, maybe tantric, maybe, it was something. It was not just me, and it wasn't just us. It was something else. So you can take that for how you want. So for me, if I'm remembering correctly, the daughter arises at Yesod, or at the moon, right? So it's the place of rectification. So she is the daughter of Venus in a way, right? Like the higher conception, because but it's not really. It's not her generative form is not Durga. It's Tripura Sundari. So Tripura Sundari arises from Hod, Mercury, you could say. That's just, she's far above the planets. Just be clear about that. She's supernal in every way to both the stars and the planets when we're talking about Tripura Sundari in particular. But she also has two expressions. So one is her Dakini. She actually has multiple expressions because she is like the queen of all the worlds. But in the world, she has two expressions. She is at Bala Tripura Sundari. So the little daughter, the little girl who plays. She also has another expression, Kurkula, who is the Dakini who dances. And actually, she even has we'll say, I'll add in a third expression for today, because we did discuss it, the Kumari, the wife of the adamantine sun. So if you listen to the spaces, we've talked a lot about Christian Kabbalah. We've talked a lot about the Tiferatic Christ element and how he perhaps comes from Hesed, but obviously Hesed has to happen and has to occur in dialectical synthesis, in a kind of balancing of the forces of opposition at Tiferet, or even in either sphere. Or either separate. It has to be a relationship. It's not too much water, too much fire. It's imbalance. Okay, so all of you know this who have attended the spaces, so I won't rehash it. But oh, sorry, Joshua, please go ahead.
I'm inclined to agree, because I'm reminded of in the Masonic temple, I think there's one of the pictures that we have on the wall is Saturn counting the locks of hair of Virgo, and she's standing on the foundation of the temple, and with a broken pillar there too. So yeah, I really do think I think I agree with that.
So one of the things, I'm glad you agree, Joshua. Obviously, I want all of us to be in some kind of like either speculative consent or just like kind of an understanding that, yeah, this is the relative truth. So you have to understand it in your own framework, but perhaps there's something also perennially true or maybe primordially true about it. So I think that's an interesting way to look at it. It's very dancing, right? But I also want to say that there's an idea that she could also represent Sirius A. So that I would accept that as well. Not as her necessarily her highest form, but certainly in the expression of a Dakini. Yeah, I could see that as well. But I do like the moon. I like Yesod. I think it makes sense. I think it. Yes, Solar, please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry for asking all the clarifying questions, but I just want to kind of keep things straight, sort of aeonically. Has Sirius A ever rotated into the position of the North Star, the pole star, like in any of the sort of meaningful sort of historical cycles of humanity? Because I know Sirius B has, right? Like at a point in the not too distant past. So I was just wondering if Sirius A has.
Well, okay, so let's talk about it. So this is something that we brought up before, and um, there are really three expressions at Hod, if you want to consider it like that. There's Mercury, so that could be Ganesh, you could say. or it could be Bala Tripura herself. That's totally acceptable. But then you also could say it's kind of the lesser prince. If you're just talking about the planet, which is obviously the klipa of the Sephira, the physical density, the sort of aggregates, but not necessarily negative, because Mercury is obviously Hod and Mercury are very special in particular. So I don't know the answer to your question directly, but I do think there could be considered three expressions. Uh, Obviously, sorry, Ketu swims in front of Mercury at all times. So I do think that that's part of it. I also think that there's the daughter, so that could be Sirius A or B, depending on. And I named it. I did name it in the Aeon when I talked about astrology. I honestly cannot remember my own work, so I apologize. But and then there's like the fuller. So there's a dragon, a girl, and a prince. So I think that's actually an interesting dialectical arrangement, and I think that actually is kind of true for Hode, because I think that's also why it gets amalgamated and misunderstood, maybe you could even say. And we also talked about how this relates to gender and all of that, because I think not necessarily Hode, but it definitely there's an element of that. There's definitely an element of hermeticism. So you want to sort of transmute and become transitive in its properties, but identity in and of itself is already transitive. So there's no like holding it into aggregate is only going to be detrimental to someone climbing the tree, rather than, so you treat it more conceptually, treat it more speculatively, and you don't necessarily, I mean, you already know this, Solar. Like, I'm not really even saying this for you. I'm really saying it for everyone listening. But you have to treat traveling through the Sephira conceptually, right? They're negative spaces, via negativa, they're empty. So you have to dance through them, especially as men. I know this is hard because I'm obviously a man, and it is hard for me. It's not always easy, and men are usually better at paths. I'm actually better at the Sephira, but I'm a little more in touch with my hermetic self in one way of thinking, simply because I embody biraciality. So if that's how you want to consider it, then I think we have to all play to our hermetic strengths. Yes, Solar, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just to kind of like connect maybe some of the reasons why I'm asking some of these questions, right? So immediately, even though I'm not working terribly actively within the kind of like Indo-European Reconstructionist framework these days, that was more where I was at a year ago. Still interested, but it's not like my primary practice, right? But still, so I'm immediately queuing like, okay, so would we sort of in this mode be dealing with a sort of Aeon of like Wotanaz, right, or Odin, something like that, right? But I think the answer is clearly no. Like you and I have talked about this, right? Where we actually put Odin on the tree. You convinced me, I think, decisively to move that attribution for what it's worth from sort of Da'at over to Chokhmah, right? Which I think
Yeah.
is more correct. So I guess what I'm interested here is there's sort of like a reflection of that, and what as and we're talking about Aeon of the Daughter. This isn't an era of Wotanaz. This is an era perhaps where the initiate sort of warrior magician king has taken the path more like of the hermit, right? I'm
Mhm.
thinking also of when like the Taoists historically no longer had like a centralized imperial court to advise, right? When things kind of went to shit for the first time after the emergence of Taoism in China, right? And so you had all these people who previously would have been sort of on the interior of machinations of power, advising kings or princes, things like that. They sort of like take to the hills, right? And they become these hermits, healers, magicians, but walking a sort of like lonely and difficult to understand route, right? They sort of shift archetypes, right, and shift social functions, and you see like Taoism take a very different sort of direction after they're sort of permanently, as it would happen, sort of removed from the operations of state power, right? And so to me, as I sort of conceptualize Aeon of the Daughter, I think of that kind of refracted Odinic aspect at Hod, right? So it's not the full strength and splendor of the initiate king as we might have had in a more golden age situation. It's something very different. We're much farther along, sort of in the mythic time.
I completely agree with that. So everything that Solar just said, like, just say that I said that. No, I'm kidding. But I do agree with that 100%. And so I always considered it like the daughter to me seems like the rectification of both the mother and the father in like their, if you want to consider it in like in a tantric way, we obviously live in a Leela. We live in the divine play. So the story's played out multiple times, and I agree. Oh, and I'm glad. I'm actually really proud of myself that I persuaded you to put Odin or Wotan, or I don't know the names, anyways. But in Hokmah, I think that makes, to me, that does make the most sense. Simply because that, in and of itself, is non-generative. I'm not saying that Woden or whatever Odin is generative. I'm just saying that dot is a very difficult sphere in terms of, if you want to really give it a Buddhist attribution, I've always likened it to Yamataka because it is the carnal ground. It requires the lightning, it requires perception, it requires the quicksilver force. So in and of itself, it is not alive. You have to bring something to it. You have to bring synthesis to there. So that's what makes it difficult. But Hokmah, a Sephira I do also like, it has all the potential. If you want to relate it to a Shakti, it is the Dhumavati. People will know that I often post that one because I like her. She's the Crow Dakini. She sits there in the interstitial time outside of all conceptual thinking. But she possesses all the seeds, but everything is in smoke, is in flux, is in perhaps the vapor. That's also an interesting way because her colors can be what? White, spectral, as in not spectral as in pink, spectral as in, how did Dion Fortune describe it? Silver tinsel. I agree. That's a perfect way to describe it. But there's actually even an easier way to think about it. If you live in a place with really beautiful sky, it doesn't even have to be beautiful, but just on a really clear day, it's like perfectly turquoise, perfectly bright blue, and there are huge cumulus clouds floating, not necessarily blocking the sun, but maybe just in the sky. If you look at the clouds in with the light passing through, now this is important. The light has to be passing through, and you see it kind of refract through the water vapor. You can think of that as Hokmah. Now, of course, the Sephira and the Buddha dakinis, at least in Buddhism, they are non-phenomenological, meaning that yes, I may liken them to lightning, I may liken them to, like especially Kurkula, to the rainbow, or Maratsi to the rising sun, or etc., or the Vajrayogini to diamond thunder, or the volcanic lightning. But they are non-phenomenological. But it doesn't mean that you can't use the phenomena to understand the kind of splendor of what the Sephira is. And that's, so in my opinion, that's a very good way, because that really gives you a very clear idea of what you see. Okay, watercolor. Okay, I'm going to bring you up. Yes, Solar, please go ahead.
I just wanted to cite too, because this to me, it's really cool when you have a direct intersection of Kabbalah and then like meditative experiences that you can access also like directly through, let's say, like a Dharmic tradition. I just wanted to say the description of silver tinsel. I had totally forgotten about that when we went through the fortune book. That is such an excellent description of like the 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 type of sort of semi-transparent like bits of light that begin to saturate, for instance, like the visual field as you enter into deeper states of meditation, like as you're closing in, if you want to say, on like revealing like primordial consciousness. That's the language that I would use in Dzogchen, right? Like you get this really, really marked effect. It's pretty striking, like the first time you experience it, right? These little tiny like motes of light that begin to accumulate, particularly like around the edges of objects in your visual field, right? Anyway, and that also is telling you once again something sort of about the, I don't know if you want to phrase it as like the Sambhogakaya of consciousness, right? The illuminating, clear light aspect of consciousness or of mind, right? To speak more specifically, and that is that is also telling you something about Chokhmah, right? So you can like draw these like really direct connections between systems, and I think that's pretty neat.
I mean, you're hitting it. Like, this is exactly what the Aeon of the Daughter was about. It was about synthesizing the ideas, synthesizing how I mean, you've listened to the Mahavijaya series, so you kind of get what, like, the tree that I was building. And so I just arranged it differently. Now, there were 2 Kali Kola versions of the tree already that I found. One was more easily available on a very popular Left Hand Path blog site. And the other one, I can't remember. Somebody sent it to me, and someone had done it like 25. Maybe it was Mike McGee had done it, and it wasn't on his site, but someone had emailed it to me. So I didn't agree with it. So I obviously had to rebuild it from scratch, as I am wont to do, as you know. So basically, but that's what it was. And it was because I had the experiences. And it was because I heard other people discussing Kabbalah, and I was like, this is it. Like, this is the same. Like, this is the same thing I'm seeing, I'm experiencing, I'm like, is happening. And it's not just me, it's other power. But it is partly me, or mostly me, or maybe it is the primordial consciousness. But I just think that we live in a world of synthesis. If you want to say the Aeon of the Sun was the sort of blending, so we became Tipperatic in our consciousness, especially Westoids, and I'm using that obviously for myself as well. I'm not using it as a pejorative in any way. I'm saying, I think maybe Western civilization in the last like 100 years has in some way raised us into Tipperatic consciousness, which is perhaps why there is, I'm not saying perfect Tipperatic consciousness, and there are negative aspects, not that the Sephra are negative, they're never negative, except in space. They are, but there are the Klepoth arise in the Sephra. I mean, we've talked about this also. No, Solar, I'm not speaking to you. Obviously, you already know this. The Klepa, and Josh also knows because I've said it many times to him and all of you. But the Klepa arise in the Sephra naturally. That's why it's better to approach them non-dually. Because if you just understand it as conceptual or perceptual or existence appearance, it will be a lot easier for you. You'll be able to confront the demons of the carnal ground, which are just of your own mind. You'll be able to confront the apparitions that appear before you, which are just of your own mind. Yes, maybe there is something else. Maybe there are ghosts that are attracted to you when you're doing it. I know when you do practice certain kinds of yogas in Dzogchen, that can happen. 100%. But like, how do you deal with it? That's what it comes down to. Do you go crazy? Do you okay, so I'll give a really concrete example. I don't usually talk in very singular terms, like this is how I do it. Maybe I do a little bit, but I think I'm pretty. I don't think I always I give concretized like examples, but I'll give you one. So sometimes when I am doing deity yoga, as you know, I like deity yoga. I'm not the Dzogchen bro that Solar is, but in my experience, if I have to deal with a rising, we'll say, phenomena, a ghost, a demon, a naga, whatever you want to call it, whatever the obstacle, like the husk of the obstacle that I'm encountering, it might be something else. It might be not of me per se, but I treat it as it is. I treat it as it is of my own mind, and then I can defeat it because I mean, and there's sort of an idea that you are the Mahakala. I'm not saying you are Mahakala or anyone in the room is Mahakala. I'm saying, I'm not Mahakala. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there is a potentiality for you to master your own time. Because time is of the mind. It's rectified in the 9. And it is the reason the carnal ground appears before us. But we also live on the garden. So that's why I also always caution against, and this is true for myself. This is a very true thing, what I'm saying. I don't ever treat it simply as the carnal ground, and I never treat it simply as the garden. I always try and recognize that it is both, and that does sometimes mean that things will arise that are painful or full of negative aggregation, you could call it. but it also means that you have the tools through which to deal with it. And you can also let things go. And you can also let reality be in flux. And I think for me, for one thing for me in particular, that I have learned over the past 5 years since COVID, since we walked through that crazy Hokmah threshold, as well as, so this is interesting for you, Joshua, is that there was a specific conjunction in 2020 that involved Neptune. I think it's Saturn. Is that right, John? Was it Neptune and Saturn? Anyways, I can't remember. But it would correspond to sort of that gateway Aeon of the Daughter idea. Because it would be like that flux being released, right? And she is on the path 22. So it's like the flux being released into the flame. If you want to think of it, like even when Solar was talking about the silver tinsel, I mean, you could even imagine it like that. It's like when you fire a musket, there are metallic flecks from the gunpowder in the air. Now I'm talking about the old kind, not new. But yeah, shotguns and things. I mean, all guns do have things, but it's cleaner now, okay? But if you think of a musket, because what is Gevra if not the flintlock, as I've argued many, many, many times in all our spaces? I think of Gevra as the flintlock. Now, in Tantra, you're going to say, Jin, what the fuck are you talking about? There's no goddess that has a gun. Well, are you sure? Because I think there is. Bagalamukhi holds a hammer, but the hammer is not in. She's not concussing the demon, okay? She's holding it in potential energy, just like a flintlock. Her power is to transform kinetic energy, that expansive Hasidic power, the ocean, maybe you could say. And she is often depicted on the ocean. Now, how that you'll say, Jin, you told us that Bagalamukhi is at Gevra. Yes, she is at Gevra, or whatever, however you want to, relate them. I think the goddesses actually, this is a new understanding I've come to, or maybe a new kind of way of thinking about it, or maybe I always thought about it this way. But I always felt like there's something. I don't like over attribution. I don't like when the male deities are put against the Sephira for obvious reasons, because I think that they are best dealt with as dakinis. Empty, luminous, massless, negative, non-dual. That's how I think of it. That's what I've experienced for myself. So I'll just speak for myself, and that's how I view it. I think the male deities, obviously exist. Obviously, I like Shiva at death. Specific kinds of Shiva, obviously, Yamataka Shiva, or Bhairava, Maha Bhairava, maybe. Not. Yes, Solar. Please go ahead.
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to get on cue. But hey, so I was just gonna say, I really love the musket specification. So the point has been made in these spaces a lot. It's fairly basic, but the gun thing gives us a new angle. Shot a lot of guns, right? Not too much black powder, but the thing you notice about black powder, it's definitely, ultimately throwing a projectile right out forward, like it does serve that function, but it's phenomenally loud, right? And the ratio to noise, like relative to the actual like force behind the projectile, is just way out of proportion to like a modern smokeless powder, right? So big noise for not that much force, enough to kill you, but relatively speaking, right? And I think that can be a really helpful way to think about like the action at Gevura, right? It's not so much about, hey, there's this thing in my life, so, or the target that I need to absolutely annihilate and destroy in this direct way. There's something, I think, or a more helpful approach can be this sort of dislocating shockwave, the sound of the black powder, so to speak, right, of the flintlock going off, that is enough, not necessarily to destroy the object in question, but enough to sort of stun you, to disrupt the relation that you hold with that object that you were taking necessarily like for granted, right? That you were just like intuitively taking as real, right? And it's the shockwave of the blast, right? That's like, oh, this is actually like an arbitrary like relation that I'm setting out between me and this other thing, me and a person, whatever the thing is, right? And in a lot of cases, just in really practical terms, you'll find that the thing dissipates all on its own once you are able to kind of from a detached position reevaluate your relationship to it. You know what I mean? It's not always like, oh, I have to just smash this thing super hard really directly all the time. Sometimes simply taking a step back allows the thing to resolve in a much better and more organic way all by itself. That to me is like almost more like Geveratic, you know?
Absolutely. Perfectly said. I could picture it in my mind. You know, like I'll picture, we'll say, revolutionary American in his dress, and he's firing the musket in a maybe dark space. Maybe it's outside, but it's dark. You can sort of see the flecks illuminate behind him. But it is the shockwave. And that's what's so interesting. It's the transformation. It's not necessarily the kinetic energy. And it is the sound, because who is at Hesed in like the way I've laid it out, and I know, Solar, I think you agree with this, is Green Tara. Who is Green Tara? Green Tara is the hearer. So she's hearing the sound. That's even what she does. She hears the cries of the world. So wouldn't she hear the shockwave? And that's exactly right, too, about Bagalamukhi. She started out as a battlefield goddess, but she was never strictly a battlefield goddess. She's really a courtroom goddess, if you really understand. And if you look at her iconography, she always stands on the black and white checkerboard. Because it's exactly like what you said. It's not necessarily to remove the enemy or the obstacle from the board itself, but anything that's impeding you, it shifts it away. That doesn't mean that she's not used for black magic. Of course she is used for black magic, and we all know, because of being very online, most of us, that Indians don't necessarily, well, they're like everybody. They don't always have the best of consciousness. So, that's true for everybody. That's not just true for Indians, but it particularly becomes true when you're dealing with magical systems in any of these places, including America. Okay, Joshua, please.
Yeah, so I was thinking about what's going on with the flint and the explosion of the powder, and actually, is it breaking the sound barriers? So is that actually a sonic boom that we're hearing? Because I know you can get subsonic rounds that don't do that, right? And so that's another element that's taking place there, is that it gets so much force that it's uh, a sonic boom's almost like unnatural, so it's like compressing sound waves. It's traveling more than like 700 miles per hour or whatever, so it's compressing the airwaves, and so that's where the thunderclap comes from. So I kind of imagine it being like a thunderclap as well, except in this case the lightning bolt's the bullet, right?
I think that's a great way to describe it. Yes, the thunderclap is part of the lightning. 100%, you're totally right. I'm not correcting you in any way. But if you're thinking of it more in a tantric system, it's really in the hearing. That's really where it takes manifestation. It's when you're in full perception of the sound and what it is. And yes, this can also do with the third eye and Tara perceiving like the universe and her role in it and who she is. And we all know, maybe we don't all know, but as if you've listened to the spaces, you will know that Tara self-combusts. That's her special power, right? She comes in, she self-combusts. Then she goes away. Then she comes in, self-combusts. That's her infinite cycle, right? Because it's like a rain cloud. It's a storm cloud. That's even how some of the Tara sadhanas describe her. It's like a dark storm cloud that's pregnant, Lambodoraya, pregnant with potential, full of of the waters, the supernal waters, clear waters, milk ocean, right? Milk ocean. So sweet water, but not sweet water as in like a Lakshmi or a Saraswati or any of those. It is sweet water of the rain. It's the calm in the storm, but she's also the storm herself, and she can also be the thunderclap herself, but only when she's in full perception. So it's a really a process of consciousness. That's how really I understand it, Joshua. More than a gross power. Of course, I believe in cities and all of that. Of course, I believe in sorcery and all of that. But also I think that those two things also have to do with consciousness. And so I want to go back to something that Solar said that I should have referred to right away, because it was in my mind, but then I obviously tangentially got a little sidetracked. Okay. He said a specific word, a keyword, you could say: stunning power. So if you know anything about Bagalamukhi, if you know anything about Gabra, if you know anything about fire as an element, as a primordial element, you'll know that it has a stunning or stambanum power. It's there. You look at a flame and you lose time, maybe even for a second, maybe even for a moment, but still, you lose time. She pulls the hammer back. She's pulling the time back. That's even one of her cities, is reversal of time. But it's not gross time, meaning that it's not time of, it's not like 20 years in the past. It's not time travel. It's perception of time. That's how she defeats her enemy. She changes his perception so she can move across the board. That's even how it's depicted. So that's how she stuns them. So we're speaking strictly conceptual, right? So she reaches into you could say into their brain or into their mouth and grabs their tongue. But that's not really, the tongue isn't really her true power or her true sort of organ relationship. What she's really doing is she's stopping for a brief moment, but also can be perpetually or habitually. She's stopping the expression of gross speech, Vox City, in from the subtle, like from your consciousness. So from your mind. So you're getting, like you have it's like a block. So you say, So if you think of it as a courtroom, it's two lawyers, remember, Barry has said, arguing against each other. That in and of itself, the argumentation makes it a little fiery, makes it a little giverotic, right? So wouldn't it be useful? I'm very pragmatic, all of you. So wouldn't it be useful if you were a lawyer? I'm not a lawyer, just to be clear. But it would be useful if you could go to that Shakti and say, I'm a lawyer. I need you to shut my enemy up. That doesn't mean that he never speaks. It just means that his argument is not cogent. It means that his words are misarticulated. Maybe it even means that his words are outside of syntax. The order in which they should appear is not the order in which they arise. Yes, Joshua, please go ahead.
That's very interesting because in a courtroom, the judge, there are female judges. And so if they have a hammer in that case, it's for ruling and making decisions, and it has authority, even if it's small, right? It's more, and in a way, that's more like a gavel, of course. But that's also very Saturnian because they typically wear like the black robes, and court is always at an appointed time. So it's very time centric as well. I just find all that was very fascinating when you were talking about that.
Okay, well, let's really get into it then. So, obviously, in certain kinds of Kali Kola, so I don't practice Kali Kola, but I understand parts of it, a lot of it maybe. The expression outward, especially for some of the Dakinis, not all of them. Some of them have more relationship with Tripura Sundari, some of them have more relationship with Tara, okay? But Bagalamukhi is a crow, or not, excuse me, not crow. Sorry, Mookie. She is not a crow Dakini. She is a crane-faced Dakini. Okay? Think of how a crane even fishes in the water. It stuns its prey through the motion, the rippling effect, the light, and the beak, single-pointed, like a gavel almost, with a little point, like an anvil maybe. You could say pierces the polar tension of the water. The surface, right? Stuns the fish, doesn't even have to touch it. It's just the shockwave. So you could say that Kali is part of that because it's obviously Binah, Gevra have a very close relationship. Sometimes it can be said to be antagonistic. Sometimes it can be said to be generative. It's dependent, right? So Kali can be a battlefield goddess. And as I just said, what is a courtroom but a kind of battlefield? So the judge represents the queen of the battlefield, but it is also the queen of the carnal ground. Now in Kali Kola, so this is not true for everything, okay? So I'm not saying a primordial truth. So just be very clear about that. Kali is the queen of the battlefield. She's much more of a battlefield goddess originally than she was a carnal ground goddess. Now, of course, she is a carnal ground goddess as well. And in a more Kali Kola centric thinking, she is the queen also of the carnal ground. So basically, you could say that Bagalamukhi is her agent, because okay, so the point about the bird-headed Dakini, so this also applies to the Dhumavati of the crow face, and I'll explain this more in a minute. They are Bardo Dakinis, so they are not necessarily in Buddhism primary figures of devotion, but they can be. But it's very text dependent, it's very lineage and tradition dependent. But in general, the Bardo Dakinis, especially the bird-headed Dakinis, tend to be in the retinue of a Buddha Dakini. So in this case, the crow-faced Dakini and the crane-faced Dakini are in the retinue of Vajra Varahi, the Diamond Thunder Sow. So, and in Srivijaya, Varahi, so she's not been Vajrafied, but Varahi, the sow-headed goddess, very important Buddhist goddess, make no mistake. One of the most important. Not the same as Vajrayogini. I know that some people will say it is. I don't agree with that. That's my own idea. That's fine. You don't have to agree. But I think that. I do not think of them as the same. But Varahi is very important because she stands on the corpse of ignorance, the Mara of ignorance. Before her, the world is only made of light, and through her scream, which is the primordial sound, she speaks into the world the power to liberate light from matter. So it is a wrathful action, but it's not necessarily that you are doing a wrathful action. It's that you are understanding it to be a wrathful action. So my point about her is she's just extremely important, but her gift is also, or her boon, one of her cities, maybe you could say, is also Vox City. Gross speech. But hers is different than Bagalamukhi. Bagalamukhi will make you gilded-tongued or golden-tongued, meaning that you will be a great orator, a great lawyer, you're great, I don't know, like a public intellectual. You will always be charming and magnetizing, because magnetizing is also part of Stambanam. Stambanam is really just you could even say Stambanam is like a category of all these other cities that are not necessarily lesser, but they're just can all be included in that sort of greater umbrella. So there's also Mohini, that's also like attracting people to you. There's a bunch. There's many. I'm not even remembering them all. Yes, Joshua, please go ahead.
I think earlier you mentioned axial, the term axial. Maybe it was in reference to the axial age, but it got me thinking in terms of the subject of the topic, rather. When we, there's a rite of passage, and when you get your license, right, to have your chariot, and you got these two axes under you, and we're harnessing that same energy that behind like a bullet with combustion of gasoline, and so it's that same explosive energy but channeled in a different way that's like horsepower. And so from a Hapaporean perspective, I can't help but think of like Slufnir. Solar would have to correct me, but the horse with many legs or whatever. So I imagine like that sort of thing. I was waiting for a time to mention it, but I didn't know if that was appropriate or not. But that was something that came to mind, like in terms of the psychic youth thing.
That's a great point, Joshua. It's always appropriate. You're allowed to talk about whatever you want to talk about. It's your co-host. So I agree. And so their Hayagriva, in my opinion, is sort of maybe that's not quite one-to-one, but there's an element, at least maybe you could say Puranic Hayagriva. Or maybe even just Surya, the sun. So, because he obviously has 7 horses, sometimes it's depicted as 9. It depends. All these things are very image and text dependent. But okay, so he has 7 green horses. They're not always green either. Sometimes it's 2 of each and then one odd one out. Depends. But in Buddhism, the horses are green. So we'll say for Hayagriva, the horse is green. So it's it's the way he harmonizes the gross sound, the voxity, gross speech, into primordial sound. And who is the consort of Hayagriva? Well, the consort of Hayagriva is actually Vajravarahi. So he takes her voxity, her power to manifest enlightened action in gross sound, and he takes it and he purifies it. He mixes it all together and he rectifies it, and then he makes it into primordial sound. That's why when you see them, not always, but when you see them, or Hayagriva at least, he will sometimes be in his consort or his consort union or consort yoga, Yab-Yam, with Varahi or Vajravarahi. That's what he's doing. He's taking her breath and he's taking it into himself and he's expressing it through the horse. So the horse, if we're going to go to maybe we'll go to a more like Levantine example. St. George is the one that I always like to talk about for this, because there is something very martial about St. George. There's obviously something very Templar about St. George. There's something very Syrian about St. George. But a lot of our so there was an Aeon of the Daughter space called Amorous Congress. So the Amorous Congress, that idea of consort consort yoga, excuse me, a union with your consort, especially in iconographic depictions, that Saint George is actually in a depiction of consort union or consort yoga, just in his regular iconography. Because before Reverse Cowgirl was called Reverse Cowgirl, it was actually called Riding the Dragon. And it referred to this exact iconography that I'm talking about. So you're going to ask, well, there's 3 characters in a St. George icon. So how can it be Riding the Dragon? Well, in some kinds of esoteric Christianity, St. George's horse actually represents the opposing polarity. Maybe it's very plus ultra. It represents the opposing polarity of the dragon. So it's the dragon purified under the will of St. George. But that can also be the maiden, because the dragon and the maiden are not always, but frequently interlinked, sometimes intermixed. And so when you see the white horse on top of the dragon, this can also be called Riding the Dragon, except that St. George then becomes the chthonic figure. He becomes the dragon. And the woman, or the consort, the white horse, that is, that's what it is. So it's the woman on top in Reverse Cowgirl. So I know I usually don't talk about sex things, but it's actually really relevant, and it was relevant in that Aeon of the Daughter episode as well. Okay, yes, Solar. I'm sorry, not Solar. Joshua, please go ahead.
Yeah, and I couldn't help but think of the term mare, which is means ocean, sea, but also horse. But then we get Mary and that sort of thing. So you were talking about Mary Magdalene earlier, and so she was a prostitute, right? So this sort of applies there as well. Those things came to mind.
Well, yes, you're right. So Mary Magdalene is not the mother, and it's really important to note that she is not the whore. That's at least the Gnostic idea, okay? So the mother can be the whore in a way, but the Nuria, at least the daughter, that's not true of her. And they even explains this in Hypostasis. It says, the angel Elileth says to her, the Archons never defiled you. They never defiled your mother, and the story that they perpetuated, the word of the Archons, is a lie. Meaning it's a klipa, it's a husk. So we have to look at it, in that way. But you are correct that the mare and mare, the mem, Right in Kabbalah, where does the word arise? The word arises from the water. So this also makes sense in Tantra because it's Tara who gives Tantra to humanity in the second turning. Yes, Solar, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to back up and dig into this a little bit more, both because I'm staring at an icon of St. George in my room right now, but also because I think there's something important, sort of with the logic and grammar of Tantra here that I want to understand more clearly, and I'm probably not the only one in this space. Okay, so originally, if we're taking the horse as essentially the dragon pierced by, or sort of like subdued by, brought under the will of St. George himself, right? And so the horse represents this sort of like synthesized, purified figure, right, of the dragon brought under his will. Okay, but then so the dragon is kind of like destroyed in that sense, or is sort of transformed into the horse. But then you kept going, and then you're like, okay, well, St. George is then still present, and now enters into a dialectical relationship of his own with the horse, which itself was a product of the first dialectical synthesis between him and the dragon, right? And I was just kind of wondering, like, why is it that St. George sort of remains to have these two relationships in series, whereas the dragon, serpent, etc., is kind of destroyed and subsumed into the figure of the horse after the first one. There's just like, it doesn't, the behavior is slightly different, and I just kind of want to understand how we got there, because it's super interesting to me.
Okay, so I'll do my best as a whatever St. George worship is. As a non-Zoroastrian, I'll do my best to explain the iconography. So I would personally, it just says to simplify it. If I was looking at, okay, so say it was a Tibetan icon of a Gyalpo, okay, of a war god, a worldly war god. There are many of them that have this same iconography, as I'm sure you kind of know, Solar. So I'm not totally out of the realm of my experience or my knowledge, but I'm imperfect, so I'm just gonna say that right away. For this, I would say that St. George has a dialectical relationship immediately with the dragon. He's penetrating the dragon with the lance. He's piercing him, right? That's the relationship. You could say that the white horse is the maiden. You could just say it's independent. She's independent, but she's under the will. What is Aeon of the daughter? Love over will. So maybe St. George becomes less important. I don't know. But in terms of that icon, that's how I would say. I would say he's will over the maiden, and he defeats the dragon, which is also himself. Thus, he is able to allow the maiden to ride him. Okay? So I guess that's the best way to say it. So I would say that there are three characters, independent, but all in a kind of, maybe you could say, it's very Kila, right? It's very like Vajra Kila. It's very like the 3 points. And so maybe that's what it is. It's very triangular, very Trinitarian. So I think that that's what also the interesting thing is like it, but you also can, and I have read an interpretation by an art history scholar about how the horse is really an expression of the kind of like, I forgot what he even called it, but he said something really interesting about it, how it did represent kind of like this Babylon mother, we'll call her, Scarlet Woman, whatever. And that would make sense, right? In the example I gave with Hayagriva. Because where could Varahi arise? Well, likely she probably arises from Netzach or Venus. But you could also say she arises at Malkuth because Varahi, her consort in non-Tantra, he upholds the world with his tusks. So you could also say that. But I think I like Netzach. I think that makes perfect sense. She is the greatest form of Mahalakshmi as well. This is also true in Shrivija. So Varahi is a more important goddess even than Kamalatmika, especially for independent worship. And obviously, as you know, Solar, she's very important in Buddhism, like one of the most. And also interesting in Shrivija that Kurakula is considered the feminine expression of Lalita in the world. But Varahi is considered the masculine, even though she's a woman, a masculine expression of Lalita in the world. So that would also make sense in the way that Shukra or Venus is counterclockwise. It would give her a hermetic turn, you could even say. Yes. Sorry, Joshua. I keep wanting to call you Dr. Birkin, which I might. So if I do that, I apologize. Joshua, please go ahead.
So I was waiting for you to mention NetSack, and it was so perfect because I wanted to mention it earlier, because today is Victory Day in Russia, and so they're celebrating victory in World War II and all. So there's a strong element of that today, and I think that's also what's kind of summed up there with Saint George and the dragon, is that it's the end result, right? So there might be some elements of sacrifice, there might be some elements of endurance. There's a lot of ingredients in the soup, right? But I also was going to ask about the connection between Chokmah, is that the sphere above it, and so maybe the connection between wisdom and victory. And so that maybe kind of reminds me of stories where the hero is told a weakness of the monster or whatever, so he, with that wisdom, he can then become victorious or whatever. So or he gets a weapon or whatever that's divine, like an astra or whatever. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that. Thanks.
No, that was great. I actually, for once, I actually have a tantric story, Joshua, that you might enjoy. So you could think of it like, because who is Varahi? She's the sow-headed one, the boar-faced. You could say that when the star goddesses fall, if you're going to consider that as part of like the, cosmopoesis of Hyperborea or the Aeon of the Daughter, or both, or just Tantra in general, she is one of the Matrikas, right? I mean, she is assigned like the third amongst the Matrikas. So she's extremely important in all throughout the last like 2,000-3,000 years, especially in the Himalayas. But you could make parallels probably in other systems, but especially there. So she falls all the way down. That's the turn of the Matrikas, if you want to call it that. They fall all the way down. Maybe they even make the Klipas. Maybe that's their function. So she has to climb all the way up. So she arises at the carnal ground, which is also the garden of corpses, especially for her. And so she has to climb all the way back up. So if you want to consider her the prime Dakini of the Bardo, the smoky place, you could say that she actually takes her full position at Hokmah. It's an interesting kind of way to think about it, I think. Supernal, in like, not, she's not Neptune, she's not Neptunian, but you could say that there's an element of that. You could say that because she is like, then she becomes the goddess who defeats all ignorance. She becomes the Mahavijja, the greatest wisdom. Now they're all Mahavijja. It's not just her, but because of her supreme importance in Buddhism, her supreme importance in Sri Vijaya Tantra, and even her importance in Bengal and Odisha and Assam and all that, with the Kamakhya temple. And there are Varahi temples up there from like the 8th and 11th century, and obviously she's part of the 64 yoginis as well. So I would say that she in of herself kind of represents the greatest wisdom, because it's the wisdom to climb all the way up from root to crown. So I don't know if that answers your question, Joshua, or gives you something to think about. But I think that what's interesting about the Dakinis is that they all have a relationship with wisdom, because they are fundamentally wisdom. Yes, Joshua, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with that, because I think one of the subtle elements of the famous imagery is that St. George has a halo, and so that would be Keter, right? So it's kind of embedded subtly there. Yeah.
No, I 100% agree with you. I think that it's not just St. George, but it's not all the saints either. And maybe that's part of the problem with like the sort of, we'll call it the Roman Republican pantheon of the saints, is that it's too much of an expression outwards, and maybe you need to refine the list. I'm not saying I agree with the pre-Vatican II like culling of the saint list. I'm saying that I think that there's too much expression. And I think that is also a danger of Hokmah, in a way. Because you could say that if the dakinis are flying and dancing around her, those are just the expressions of her. And if you look up a Vrajavarahi mandala, that's how they're expressed. It's expressions of her, because it's expressions of the sound. Because sound is also what? Light. And what are dakinis? They're empty, they're luminous, and they're massless. But they also are the bija, the primordial word. Yes, Solar, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I don't know, one interesting aspect of the George and sort of like relating to wisdom is that so George is this interesting figure, right? Because he's a Christian, but specifically he's still very much like wrapped up in his duty as a soldier, and so he by default inherited this tradition of basically like for him, the dragon, it would be his supreme crowning achievement, right, of martial prowess, right? This would be his ticket to undying fame, right? I know we're in a Roman context, not in a sort of, heroic Greek context at this point, but still, we're talking about an honor culture where the great victors are literally deified, right, on a fairly regular basis, like in the Roman Empire, right? They are brought into the sort of pantheon of greater or lesser deified figures, okay? But in order to even confront the dragon, like George has to ride out having abandoned that explicitly, like as an object, as a potential outcome of doing his duty, right? He has to do his duty instead as an empty vessel, right? As a sort of like sacrificial vessel. Like he has already lost himself. He has already slain and conquered himself before he even goes out to ride out against the dragon, right? And so I think in a lot of ways, and again, you could say a lot about this, especially for guys who are more into the like Indo-Aryan like reconstruction, right? But for better or worse, he represents this kind of like pivotal figure of the triumph of one sort of culture, one way of thinking about duty and sacrifice compared to the previous kind of Greco-Roman context, right? Of deification through accomplishment, sort of if you want to call it like a Luciferian, again, this sort of like elevation of self. Again, speaking kind of quickly and in gloss here, but that to me is an aspect of the sort of like wisdom of Saint George, right? It's not just that he slays the dragon, which is probably a later addition to his hagiography, frankly, but it's that he does his duty sort of like selflessly, empty of self, right? And he carries that same attitude, that sort of like eager indifference, as he marches to his own death, right, during the persecutions.
So that was so great, because I was also thinking like there is something kind of non-dual about him. Like he is kind of like Zen, you could say. Maybe that's a good expression of what it would be. It's like I can, it's like being exactly in the moment. Like you are dead in the future, because it doesn't really matter, because all that is right in front of you. It's the lance and the dragon. And yeah, maybe the dragon is a later addition, and I'm fine with that. Obviously the tomb of St. George is located in Syria. I don't know if it has the depiction of the dragon on the tomb, but it has a depiction of the horse, so maybe you're right, Solar. I don't know, but I think it's interesting, because you could say that obviously his expression in the lower world is the dragon. He's completely defeated his egoic consciousness, because that's very Tipperatic, right? And the Ketu is right there at the sun at all times, just as he is at Hod. It's just maybe a little more vaporous at the sun rather than at Hod, where he can maybe take more full expression, right? Because like Ketu and Rahu, well, in Buddhism we think of it as one person or one entity. So he swims, right? He swims in the blood ocean. So he's very close to us, very close to our perception, our desires. That's a big part of it. So I totally agree with you. I think that, and I love that you put it in a cultural context, because this is something that I'm probably very weak in terms of like European history and sort of these Western history in general. So I appreciate that you did that. Yes, Joshua, I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So I didn't know about his profession as a soldier. So hearing that, I began to imagine, so if we see the dragon as like a Saturnian element here, what is the saying? Like, once you have what is it, 10,000 hours of something, you're an expert or a master. So this would be like his magnum opus, his accomplishment, his masterpiece. If he were an artist, this is his masterpiece, right? And which has ironically become art. But there's also that element of being preserved and in an immortal sense through the stories, just like kind of how Gilgamesh was, right? Through he has fame through his story or whatever. And so the Christian church sees it as like the body of Christ, or in Judaism, it's like the concept of Hashem, belonging to the house of the Lord or whatever. So attaining this crown is also kind of like the element in Revelation, right? There's the giving out of the crowns and such, which is very Netzach, right?
So, okay, so let's do a little tantric iconography because I think it might help clarify it. So let's think of in your mind at least, and hey Zaralatha and Blue Hour Bookery, Aya Hashem, and Bogdanov. Hey guys, usually I'll do full shout outs for people in the room, but we've kind of been on I think a really interesting current. So I think we're just kind of surfing with it. But okay, so we're thinking of Rahula, Za, right? So in Tantra, I'll teach you a secret thing. He has 9 heads, but really he only has 8 heads because he has a crown. So what is his crown? His crown is a crow or a raven. Okay, so that creates the 9th. So that's interesting from a Kabbalistic perspective because you could say the 9th Sephirah is also Binah. It depends how you're going up or down the tree, right? Like you can renumber them depending on your orientation, your view. So yeah, so that is interesting. But then also you can say it also represents Hokmah because, as I said, Dumavati is the crow-faced Dakini. So that maybe is more associated with that. And Kali is, in fact, not even associated with crows at all. In fact, the bird of the carnal ground is considered to be a vulture. So that would be a lot more Binah. But you could also say that that is where he densifies. Because as I've said in every space, Kali cannot remediate Rahu in a birth chart. Impossible. Densifies Rahu. Not necessarily makes it worse. It just densifies the karma that he implicates in your chart. So I think that so I think that's what his relationship with Saturn is. Maybe it makes him come into focus because Saturn or Binah is very like magnetizing in a way, draws things in like almost like a pinwheel or a pinhole camera. That's kind of how it is. Kind of draws things into a single or like perceptual focus. So that's where he densifies and becomes manifest in the material world. I think you can describe it like that. So I don't particularly consider him Saturnian, but I understand that there are people who do, both in Indian Tantra, especially South Indian Tantra, and the like Western, more Kali Kola, left hand path stuff. So I understand. Yeah, okay, I agree. Densifies, but he's not really Saturn. Shawnee, especially in Jyotisha, he's a distinct figure, very distinct, right? Because Rahu and Ketu really have their own planets. That's really how it's considered. Yes, they're shadow planets, or they're nadis, or they're the nodes, but it's not really. It's really shadow planets, almost negative planets, you could say. Yes, Solar, please go ahead.
Sorry, and if you don't want to take this on the going sideways, that's totally fine. But I'm just really curious. So like, what is the theoretical, as practitioners would understand it? Why would you intentionally, I would say, reify or densify? Why would you go out of your way to try to bring things into sort of that degree of apparent solidity? Is it so that you can then address and destroy them more efficiently? Like what, in terms of the sort of like logic and grammar of that practice internally, like why would you do that? I'm not saying why would you or I do it. I don't think either of us generally practice anything like that, but
Okay, so let's think of it tantrically, okay? Because I probably can describe it a little better. So one of the expressions, you could say one of the expressions of Binah is Kala Bhairava. Can also be Mahakala, but slightly different. So we'll call it Kala Bhairava, the ferocious time king. So you would manifest things in order to, well, think of the Buddhist iconography of Mahakala. What is he doing in Buddhist iconography? Sometimes he's riding a horse, sometimes he's riding a tiger, but usually, not always, but usually, he's depicted as sitting on his carnal ground dais, his kind of throne of the carnal ground. So, although, yes, of course, there's a Kamarkagyu Mahakala Bernagchen with who's dancing. But if you understand the Mahakala sadhanas, they're slow acting. He's slow. They even make a joke about it that he takes a long time to put his shoes on. So they invoked him in this great battle against the Mongolians, and they were doing the Mahakala Puja, invoking him. Okay, so the battle came and went, and then he appeared afterwards. That's very Time King, right? He's late to his own party, so. And he was so angry, he took his moon blade, his crescent moon blade, and his kartika, right? And he slashes one of the temple pillars. And supposedly there's a gouge in that pillar to this day. So, anyways, so I think you laid it out, Solar. I think that that's why you would do it now. Because if we're thinking in a tantric way, there's a specific hierarchy of how obstacles are cleared and what obstacles get cleared and with what name or form or vessel or deity or practice. So, interestingly, while Kala Bhairava doesn't necessarily remove Rahu from the birth chart, he can actually lessen the intensity. So maybe he blocks the path, you could say. Not all of it, but maybe some of the aggregation that comes with Rahu. Remember, Rahu is the most dualistic. Rahu is the full-on materialist. He loves Venus. He loves her beauty, her sensuality, her sexiness. He's horny for her. Everything. He loves the wealth that she grants, the materiality, all the pleasures of the world, both normative and transgressive. And then you have Ketu, who's like, I want to give everything up in the world and just return to the smoky palace and I'm the guru. And then you accumulate people who think you're a guru. That's kind of Ketu's role, right? He leads the ashram, but he kind of pretends like he doesn't. He's like the fool archetype in a way, because he's like, I don't care about materiality, but really he kind of does, because really he's also Rahu, right? They're not really different. They're just so dualistic. They're so opposed to each other in their identities that they believe themselves separate. But the head also has a tail. That's how it goes. So, I would say, so you could densify many things, and you could also magnetize things. There's nothing, Mahakala, there's a form of Mahakala, white Mahakala, he gives wealth. He's a wealth protector. That's not his exact function. I'm not really articulating it perfectly. He's more of a benefactor, meaning that he makes all the obstacles before you sort of cleared, so the blessings can come your way. But in Indian Tantra, there actually is a form of Bhairava, who is called Swarnakarshana Bhairava, who is kind of the Lord of Pluto. So you could say maybe related to Dath. And you could say that he grants infinite wealth, because Dath has a special connection to that kind of treasury of, I guess, all three worlds, the three world treasury. So there are depictions of him, and I've posted them in the chat, of Swarnakarshana, and he gives boons and wealth to both Kubera and Lakshmi. Now, I know all the normative Indians will say, Jin, what are you talking about? Lakshmi is not married to Kubera. Well, in Tantra, she is. Because Kubera is the Yaksha king. He's the guru of the Yakshas, right? The guru of the nature spirits. But he's also, I always joke, but in the most tender-hearted way, that he is kind of like, he's like the very successful Jay, who is also an accountant or a lawyer. But he's not necessarily the best looking amongst them. Okay, so he has a trophy wife, and that's what it is. That's their relationship. That's even how it's described. He is the You know, he's the guy. He's the bean counter in the treasury. That's what he does. He sits behind the doors, and he counts all the treasury of heaven and earth. And she is the goddess of wealth and fortune. So she wants to spend it all. But he can't spend it all because it's not all his, although he is a very rich man. But he also can't resist her. So theirs is an interesting dialectical pairing in that way. But you can also consider him to be an expression of Kala Bhairava as a yaksha. Because remember, this is also how the Mahakala was also described. The earliest tantras. Mahakala, yes, he can be considered to be a name of Shiva, for sure, 100%. I'm not contradicting that. But there's also an idea in Buddhism, so maybe this is more of a Buddha Dharma idea. But that yakshas, in a way, contain all the potential. They have the potential to slay the higher gods. They have the potential to reach apotheosis as Buddhas. They're not so aggregated, maybe more ferocious. Maybe that's why they're depicted in not just Buddhist Tantra, but also in Indian Tantra. They're depicted as very ferocious. Because, in a way, maybe they embody like the more primordial forces of the world. They're not so, right? Because they're more living here. They're not, yes, they live in the Devaloka in a way, but they also live in the human realm in a way. So they're close to us. They're closest to our experience. So they're closer to us in the hierarchy. And of course, I believe that man is number one in the hierarchy. I do believe that personally, but it's my opinion. You can take it or leave it. But I do also think that's an Aeon of the Daughter thing. Maybe it's a Luciferic thing. Maybe that's just a Jin thing. I don't know. But I do think man is pretty much the most important. I think we should be anthrocentric, whatever. Anthropocentric. But, okay, what was I saying? Okay, so yakshas. So the earliest kinds of Buddhist Tantra would tame the yakshas, just like the St. George and the Dragon, actually. This actually cycled back very nicely. So you could consider maybe St. George as the Tantrika, and he's holding his Vajrakila, or his Kila at least, his Purva. And he's pointing it at the dragon. And really what the dragon is that lightning. It's that quicksilver consciousness, that, primordial, wrathful thing that's in poison. It's in the formation of poison, but through the action of pegging, that's a joke, but it's also not a joke, he takes the dragon inside and he changes it, right? Like Omahong, like what's he doing? He's purifying it. He's making it a figure eight. He's transmuting all the poisons away, all the aggregations, all gone. So that's also what the potential of a yaksha is. It's to have a dialectical relationship with man. Yes, Solar, please go ahead. And I know, Joshua, you guys did it at the same time, but I'm going to just let you go in the order I saw.
Mine's real quick. I just want to say, like, that's almost, of course, Evola doesn't say pegging. Okay, sorry. But he does say, I think it's like pinning or something like that. When he's in his alchemy book, when he's referring to the process of sort of like bringing that sort of like liberated but completely sort of unbounded and de-individuated spirit back down and sort of like affixing it to the solar principle of the individual. I'm pretty sure he uses language that is like either pinning it or something to the effect of essentially like spearing it through with this sort of like supra individual will and consciousness that gives it form, right? Because you don't want just this sort of like infinitely liberated, sort of like formless, empty mercurial spirit, right? At least in the Western alchemical sort of like logic, right? I just thought that was kind of an interesting like overlap. It's almost verbatim.
Well, obviously, and shout out to our episode Solar, which is coming out this month. That, I think that Evelyn knows a lot of shit, and I think he's talking about something very real. I said the dragon has a Tiferatic quality, or like he's always there anyway, just as he is at Hode. So I think that, I think he's talking about the same thing. So I agree with that. And okay, Joshua, yes, please go.
I really appreciated that, Solar. That was interesting. And the ever presence of the dragon because he just seems to have that reoccurring nature, right? It almost kind of implies too that there's a camaraderie of sorts, or a rivalry, almost how iron sharpens iron. It's like, what would one be without the other? They would probably feel without purpose or something like that. So, but what came to mind earlier when you were talking about the spear and the dragon, I couldn't help but think of Draco. And so I was wondering if there's any position astrologically that would maybe have significance here.
So really in Buddhist Tantra, Rahu, he covers all of this sort of in a way. But so do some of the Anuttara yoga deities, the higher yoga deities, okay? So just know what I'm saying is true some of the time, at least. He is the deity of all the planets and the stars. That's why I tried to make a point about his Raven's crown. So he really is the god of space, you could say. He is the Vishnu, the Mahavishnu, not just Vishnu of Puranas, but he is the Mahavishnu. In Buddhism is Rahula. So a 10th level Bhumi, a Buddha, but a worldly one. Enlightened, wisdom protector, yes, but worldly in his character. Okay? So, yeah, I think that that's what it is like he is the hero. He's the worldly hero. He has to appear on the island that floats above or on the blood ocean. That's his duty, maybe you could say, to bring that around to St. George. Theirs is a perennial battle. And I want to shout out John, because John said something really interesting. We were talking about hermeticism, and I probably made a tranny joke, or just being like really racial, whatever. I said something funny and whatever. Okay, so John said men are both from Mars and Mercury. And actually, been thinking a lot about this, John, and it's specifically because of you. But it was also because we were all discussing these ideas, okay? Like, yes, the idea that men are from Mars is relatively new. The older idea is men are from Mercury, okay. But what if both are true at the same time? So maybe the whole point for man is to start at the prince and to work their way through to Gebra to Tiferet. That doesn't mean that you're going upwards. If you want to consider it, I know Matt uses the other system with the tarot. That's different. But I'm going to use the one that I'm more familiar with, okay? So, no, we love Matt. It's just that I'm going to use a slightly different way to describe it. The hangman is there, which I know you're very fascinated with, Joshua. So that means that path is blocked. That spark of splendor at Hode has to find a different route, right? And that's even how they're ordered. So it makes sense that he has to travel through the paths if the man is indeed the word or the spark or a combination of both or neither of those things. The hero has to take expression. So a traditional hero, a soldier, a viras, because remember, what are the goddesses of the carnal ground, if not also the battlefield, right? So it would make perfect sense to have a Virasic tantric path, and there are Virasic goddesses. Now, I'm not going to discuss it or tell you how to do it, but I just will say that there are specific goddesses that are considered to be Mahaviras, greater heroes. So only their Marga can be approached as a greater hero, meaning that you have to be a soldier, or sometimes it's an executioner. It depends. So just think of it like that. Think of it as you're embodying archetypes, right? So I think I mean, there's many expressions of the hero. There's many expressions of Hokmah, right? Because it's unmanifest wisdom. Not every man develops his Shakti. You could even think of it like that. Because what is also the Shakti, if not the fulfillment of the hero's journey, right? Like the guy always gets the girl. If you want it, that's perfectly fine. That's perfect. That's very plus ultra way to describe it. The boy always gets the girl. So just take that however you want conceptually, but I think that that's true. So, but there are different ways to get there, and some people don't always get there. So you have dead ends. So I think both are true. there's a hermetic element because you have choice, you have free will. I'm a big believer in free will. I believe we have free will. If you know what that is, I don't think most people know what that is. I just don't. I don't think will is everything, however. As I said, this is an aeon of love under will, but also if you just take that as a speculative idea and you're thinking more dharmically or axially, yeah, that also kind of makes sense because bodhicitta really is everything. You can express Buddhism in not one word. Yes, I know, take refuge, all that, everything. Yes, of course. I'm not disparaging that in any way. I just want to be clear. But I'm saying that you could really just express Dharma. You don't even have to say the word Dharma. You could just say bodhicitta. Although I think that there's this is neither here nor there, but I think that there's probably a mistake in discarding the word Dharma for people who don't know. But I think it's perfectly fine to say, if someone asks you what is Dharma and you say it's bodhicitta, that's fine. That's the full expression of what it is, because love is infinite in its capacity. You are infinite in your capacity to love. Love is the cause of knowledge. Lamed, mem, dalet. That was the whole Aeon of the Daughter, like in summation. Path 22, Lamed, mem, dalet. Love is the cause of knowledge. The daughter is the heart of Eve. The spark of Hod is what? The heart of Hesed. Okay, sorry, Joshua, I know I went on a tangent.
No, it's perfect, man, because it reminded me, as you're saying, like some people don't complete the hero's journey or something like that, and it kind of reminded me of how important it is to go through rites of passage, whether it be like for instance, in Boy Scouts, we had different ranks, and so it kind of seems like the Sephiroth is in a similar manner, right? Like maybe initiations are kind of like analogous to the three levels in the Sephiroth tree or whatever, like the three worlds or whatever. So I kind of was thinking about that. I was just wondering if that was analogous here.
I think so. But so I'm just going to say I'm a little less institutionally affixed. Okay? In my current thinking, in the way that I'm kind of moving around the carnal ground, we'll say. It's not that I don't think that they're useful. I do. But I also think that the Aeon is about psychic youth rather than magi up through the ranks. It's not any less magical. It's just magic in a different way. It's magic contained in consciousness. But okay, sorry, say that again, Joshua, and then I'll percolate on what I now have forgotten. I actually
No,
have a
that's
response for you.
it's actually perfect because I had thought of this earlier and then was just thinking it was impossible to probably bring up. But to add to the psychic youth thing, um, well, there's a lot of times screening done in schools for what they call like the GATE program. So they're screening for psionic or Siddhis or whatever they might be. But I found out that that's not just in the United States. Apparently, they do that in other countries. So that kind of came to mind, but I didn't expect it to come up.
Well, I think that we're talking about like these more tantric things, maybe based in reality, maybe based in textual reality or practical reality, like very bina chokma. So we're doing like a kind of synthesis. Maybe we're doing Dath right now through our sound waves, through the kingdom that is X, both 10 and 11. We always say that, right? Like every space we do, we explicitly say that this is magic. So okay, passage through time. So I'm going to come back to that because I think that's really interesting. So I'm less institutionally biased, we'll say. I love Dharma. I follow Dharma, practice Dharma. Refuge in the Guru Deva Dakini. Okay, all that. But also, I think that the institutional methods. I'm not talking about Buddhism, but I'm talking about maybe more broadly. I think that it hasn't necessarily been well defined, well articulated, and people have okay, so our friend HD 25, who's in our lodge, he said to me, or maybe he said it in the Lodge, I can't remember, but he said that people have done the best they could with the bijas that they have. I believe that now. I can see that that's true. I don't think that I don't condone anything sicko shit or anything like that. I definitely do not. I just think that people were trying to make things work, and they, made them work in the way that they perceive perceptual thinking, even conceptual thinking. They took of it and they saw it and they took it literally. So as you guys know, I'm not anti Martinist or anti-American Protestantism. I know that is kind of the framework of America is Protestantism. I get it. Okay, that's fine. But I also think that there's danger in that, not in all Protestantism, but in Calvinism in particular, in Tulip specifically, because it's very literalist and it's also very degraded. It's going to just be like, the world is shit, so the way you act in it doesn't really affect anything. And I agree, the way that, don't be plus ultra in the way that you're trying to shift the world axis, but maybe be plus ultra in the way that you're trying to navigate the world axis. Maybe that's a better framing of that. I don't know. But just try and be more flexible and less maybe specific in your intention to go either way. Like, be more dancing, okay? But I think this also goes back, and I know this will sound really random, but I've been thinking about that idea of the acupuncture that Solar brought up, and I think Joshua also brought up. That kind of like, well, the dragon can be the ley line. Like, if you look at an image of a Tonka of Hayagriva, he's standing on the 12 Naga kings, dragon kings, okay? These are the dragons of outer disharmonies, influxes in the ley lines that can manifest in many different ways. Can manifest in bad luck, can manifest in bad water, can manifest in bad food, it can manifest in disease, plagues, storms. So I also think that also is what St. George is doing. I think he's pinning the dragon, but you can also take it more conceptually where he's pinning the ley line to the ground. So in a way, he is the cause of a lightning strike. Yes, Solar, please go.
I was going to say that just tracks really, really well, like with a sort of like broad comparative analysis, right? Like the obvious go-to is the corpse of Tiamat, right? Which kind of gets translated into from a draconic context into a giant context when we go into like Northern Indo-European tradition. But still, like at a kind of root level, like we're talking about the sort of like void dragon, right? This sort of chaotic wellspring from which all being could spring. But once our actual universe, the real thing, once an order is already at least provisionally imposed, the intrusions, the continuous intrusions of that kind of chaotic force generally manifest in terms that are maybe not super nice and fun to deal with as like, individual human beings. Like we perceive them as hostile or threatening, right? And so in the kind of like normie exoteric context, we try to, banish these things, seek refuge in these kind of like established pillars of order, to kind of keep that chaotic energy at bay. And then for the enterprising individual magician, right, like we can maybe like surf those currents a little bit more. We can maybe intentionally engage with that sort of like chaotic fertile draconic current, but we have to know exactly what we're doing and where we want to try to pin that energy, right? How we want to channel it, because we have a million different sort of stories and fables of again, would-be sorcerers or initiates of some kind or other, trying to surf that energy, not having a clear idea of what they're trying to do or how to do it, and being sort of just like overcome with the the sort of like polyphonic, like polymorphic power of potential overwhelming their insufficiently virile being, right?
That was so well said. Sorry, I was weed coughing. Okay. No, that was so well said. I totally agree with that. I co-sign everything you said. I wish I had said it. I always think when people bring up Tiamat of course, Ekajati, because there's no other goddess that exemplifies that Tiamat figure that's still like a living practice goddess as her, who's also Chamunda, of course. So she gives birth to Rahula. That's definitely some stories, especially in Nyingma. It's absolutely true in Indian Buddhism. She's the husk, right? That's what she's considered, the sunken goddess, the vessel. She's expelled all the menstrual blood, expelled all the fluid, so she can only be dried. So yeah, she is the void. She is the wellspring of the dragon. She's also the wellspring of potential because the world is also her. But this is like primordial grandmother shit, if you want to call it that as well, right? And so that's what's also interesting about Aeon of the Daughters, because it specifically says like her familial relationality to this Barbello Tiamat figure. But they actually have a very interesting and close relationship in a way. If you understand Ekajati as being subjugated in, I guess it would be like the 8th century, maybe, by Padmasambhava. Okay, say that's just a speculative. You don't have to believe that, but I personally do believe that. Okay, it makes sense to me. But maybe this is just a conscious story telling you, as an upasaka, also how to conquer this primordial goddess. And that is exactly what he did. He took his Purba, his Vajra. Joshua, I hope you're listening. His Vajra. It only had two, it was the one with 2 prongs, 5 prongs on each end, okay? So it was a 10-pronged Vajra. But he spun it, it spun like a chakra, a spinning wheel. This also has a secret tantric meaning, because a chakra is also the consort, it's also the Shakti, okay? He spun it, and he blinds her worldly eyes. So her 2 eyes are blinded. Why would he do that? Because when she had her worldly eyes, her eyes that only could see the matter in front of her, it enraged her. Because she understands that the world is not composed, in fact, of matter. It's composed of light and consciousness. So he blinds her. She can no longer see the material eyes, or the material world, excuse me. But her 3rd eye opens. And when it opens, she can see reality for what it is, a subtle creation. So, what does this have to do with the Aeon of the Daughter? Well, the daughter, unlike the mother, you could say is sort of the utmost materiality. Like, she is the diamond. She is the, she is the grandmother come into thunder, like refined through many leelas, through many plays, many archetypes that she has taken. She can become the Diamond Thunder, whatever, mother. Okay? But what's different about the daughter's also subtle. The daughter's also the pink ray. The daughter's also synthesis. It's also synthetic. It's also syncretic. It's also Gnostic. It's also non-dual. So it's kind of the resolution of the Leela in a way. Because she's also, as I've said many times, she's also complementary to the sun. So to go back to the St. George thing, maybe what is truly missing from the St. George image is not the horse or the dragon transformed into other archetypes, but maybe keeping those archetypes there, but adding another figure. Maybe you could say the horse is in fact not the maiden, but the horse in a way represents the nobility of a consort, or both of them together. I don't know. Maybe you could say that sort of resolves, even in a tantric way. If you're saying his lance is like Aquila, well, one of the functions of Aquila is the rectification of life force. Life force is practiced, well, this specific kind of rectification is practiced in consort yoga. Now, that does not necessarily mean literally, and most often, it does not mean literally, but it's talking about breath and tumo and body temperature raising, but it's also about the visualization of the consort with you. So there is a sexy, you could say, component, but you're changing, you're transmuting that and transforming that. And so this also answers this is the point I was trying to make, Joshua, about the institutional affiliations. Everybody's tried their best. We have the seeds in the world. We live in no greater information age than now. But what is the fire of Gevra if nothing but discernment? Like if you were just saying one essential quality of Gevra to a normie who's not necessarily equipped, I won't say capable, but I'll say they're not necessarily equipped to understand the very complex ways that we often articulate it. I'm not saying that I'm the most complex Kabbalistic thinker. I'm definitely not. What I'm saying is I know that people sometimes have a hard time following because they have said it. So I'm just saying that we're a little higher end, maybe. But if you were going to say one quality, discernment's perfect. So you're throwing the seeds into the fire. You're burning away what is negative. You're burning away what is aggregate. You're burning away which is not pragmatic, which is ineffective. And you're taking it out into path 22 and you're bringing it into synthesis. And you're also going into higher knowledge and you're also going into the crown. It's all three worlds together on Yesod, because that's really where we are. Yes, Joshua, please go ahead.
Yeah, and that reminds me of how if you're maintaining property, right, there is a guru element of clearing out brush and pruning, and those things get thrown into the fire, right? And that sounds very biblical because throughout the Bible, there's all these agricultural parables, right? And so by just going through the practice of some of these things, we can kind of sometimes get a clue into the twilight language, right? And I think it's referencing things like this, where if you just let it go wild, you actually won't have fruit a lot of times, or it will be not good quality. But by applying Garuva in a manicured kind of way or precise way and not just totally destroying the tree, you can have great fruit, right? So I just thought that was very analogous here.
It is. It absolutely is. I like Hesed because it's infinite in its capacity, right? So, and I'm drawn to it. I just am. I don't know. Maybe that's an Aeonic thing as well. Because I used to be very resistant. At least even 2 years ago, I was much more resistant to that sort of loving kindness quality. Simply because of all the things that we had gone through. I felt very brittle. I felt much more dualistic. Even though I was kind of thinking through things in a non-dual way, I realized that, wow, I'm self-cherishing quite a lot, quite often. Some of my perceptions of things, I'm not necessarily saying that I don't believe in them. I do believe in them. Conspiracy is totally real. The archons are real. But the way that I engage with it is very different now. I treat everything speculatively. I try and look for the parts of the Leela that I can discern, understand, and sort of disaggregate what would make sense to me in this new post-truth. I know Solar agrees with this, at least. I'll say he does, because it makes me sound like more edified in my consciousness or whatever. We just live in a post-truth world, and so what is the truth if not also the world, if not also the daughter? So all the three, like those three ideas coinciding together, that's kind of what I think. It's like you have to really understand that the crystal millennium, if you want to call it that, shout out Sachki. If you're thinking of it like that, it's a really good metaphor. It's like the crystal millennium kingdom on Yesod, on the moon. It's there if you want. It's there if you know it's there. But even though you may know it's there, you don't always see it. It comes in and out of view. That's normal. That happens for everybody. Some people are more attuned and can like tap right into the Dharma stream, whatever. That's fine. And that can be useful too. But playing in there too much, you get aggregated. That's even why you could say you're dipping your stick into the Quicksilver Ocean or the Quicksilver River. And so it comes out, but everyone's bullshit kind of comes with it. Like, yeah, you can get some cool ideas, all that stuff. But you get like aggregates. But those are also part of you, right? And sometimes they also manifest in ferocious ways. So it's like, how do you accomplish those kinds of things that arise? This is why I have a hard time with, it's not that I don't believe in deities. It's not that I don't believe in worldly spirits. I do. I just think that it's neither here nor there. I'm more interested in what's efficacious, what's useful, and what puts our like will and free will, I'm meaning free will, and also our infinite capacity for loving kindness, like what puts that at the forefront. So I guess that was a long way about saying, I don't even know what my original point was. I think it was about Hesed and how much I have sort of debrittalized myself, sort of made myself more fluid, more able to dance, rectified maybe. There is a quality of Gevra that has to be rectification, just like we talked about with Bagalamukhi and Tara. It's like this, the thunderclap, at least the sound of it, but what is Hesed is really the hearing of it, the perception of it, but knowing also what it is. So there's also kind of maybe a tripartite element there with Binah. So that's interesting, Joshua, to sort of go all the way back around. And I apologize for losing my point. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. I was curious then, how can maybe faith or belief in deity affect the dharma of the individual? For instance, if chesed or kindness was something that you could just turn off or on, so be it. But then, like, if you felt like you were being scrutinized by a deity or something, you might look at it differently or whatever. So I was just wondering if that is a component or an ingredient on the path to crown or Keter or something like that.
Look, I'll just say it in a very simple way. I do think God is real. I'm just not a I'm just not a polytheist by nature. I'm not really a theist by nature. So you're asking me something that's like very difficult for me to understand. Do I believe in things outside of myself? Absolutely. Have I seen things outside of myself? Absolutely. I'm just not, whether a deity is interested in your life or not. I'm more interested in like, what does that mean? Like, what are you going to do with that? Is that like a tool? Does it benefit your karma? Often that doesn't. I'm just going to tell you. People tend to do things they think that the higher spirits tell them. No, that's also part of Gevra. You have to discern that for yourself. Like that, you don't just like let a spirit tell you what to do. In fact, I would say don't listen to them most of the time. That doesn't mean they're not right. Sure, they're right sometimes, many times, maybe 99% of the time. But that doesn't make them omniscient, and it doesn't even make them higher than you. So I'm not I'm not an anti-spirit person per se, but I'm also not a spiritualist. So it's a paradox, you could say, for me. But I believe in the Dakinis, I believe in the Buddhas, and I believe in the deities. So understand that however you want. Okay, Joshua, please go ahead.
Hey, as a tangent to that, it reminded me of the story of Solomon when he would converse with spirits. Some of them he would have to put in certain geometric figures, like in a triangle or whatever, or they would lie. And so when you said that, I thought, wow, was there some type of significance to that with geometry?
Well, absolutely, because you can only contain, as you know, Joshua, we've even discussed this, you can only contain time in threes, right, in three. The expression of the one has to be expressed in three. That's also why like a lot of Jewish Kabbalists like Hesed, because you also get the one and the three, you're putting them together, right? So, you know, I don't know. I don't know, Joshua. Okay, I'll leave you. Okay, so we're gonna close soon, but I'm gonna let each of you say your last piece after me. But I guess I'm sorry that to close abruptly. I did say that it was gonna be a shorter space, but I want to say thank you all for coming. Obviously, I hope this was a fun, generative, like that's why I call it Arc Null, because it's not necessarily part of the canon, but sure, I thought we could have like an interesting discussion before I go on break. And I also hope that we would do this exact thing. And it's interesting that we made it on a victory day. I didn't even intend that we talked about St. George, that victory day, that the, Durga, one of her many names is like the goddess of victory. That's also the name of Varahi, right? But Varahi in the more Indian Shakta Tantra way, where she's riding a Vahana, not as a Dakini. And we should have discussed that probably, like the difference between like a goddess and a Dakini, because I think that would be interesting for you, Joshua, to sort of answer or respond at least to some of your question about deity. So, as I said, believe in God. I don't think that's the end, though. I don't even know. I think there's something higher, and I think that there's something higher than cosmology. I think consciousness is infinite in its potential. Just like Hode rising, Hode maxing, like let's fucking go. That's where I'm at. I'm being serious. I'm not even kidding. Like I'm being a little funny, but I think this is the Aeon of Man. I think that's why it's the Aeon of the Daughter, and I think I laid it out why. I think there's a whole biological reason that's true as well. I think there's an astrological reason. I think there's a textual reason, and I think it's the information, kind of like the AI, I, right? That's crazy. The Aeon of Love, the Aeon of AI. I'm not saying I don't think AI is the daughter. Be very clear about that. I'm talking about connection, what we're doing right now. Yeah, it started as something else, and now it's become something cool, generative, that other people speak about. How people tag me in Hyperborean posts now. I'm not even kidding. They've been doing it for about 2 months, but I've especially got it since Joe has been doing his safe sleazy stuff. So I don't know. The ideas must be, they must be just percolating, because I'm thinking about them. I know we're all thinking about, at least all of us, most of us are thinking about it. Like, what is the American religion? Like, what do we do with all the conspiracy theories that I learned? Like, what am I supposed to do with that? Do I just let it all go? And I'm fine with that. But I actually think it's been more interesting to kind of look at it through this comparative religious lens, where you're kind of looking at the landscape. And instead of being judgmental and super Manichaean about it, you're saying, okay, yeah, that's a fuck up. There's a Kabbalistic fuck up. There's a dead end. There's something, whatever. That didn't have potential. Yeah, maybe that's what we should be doing. And I even said that. It's like there's a whole movement in the 19th and 20th century called Rime, which was doing this exact thing. They were looking at tantric texts, both Indian and Buddhist, and they were obviously making sure that they adhered to their idea of what Buddha Dharma was. But the idea was, if it didn't work, did it adhere to these Dharmic principles? And it kind of didn't matter in some ways if what the orientation of the text was. And there was also a way to remix the text, just like we talk about all. Welcome to Hyperborea is a speculative space. I mean, it is a parafictional space where we're blending different ideas with history, with text, with our own synthesis, and we're doing it in live, we're doing it in real time, and we're doing it in discourse. So, like, very intentional, magical action in time and space, transcending time, in our own consciousness, and we're doing it in consent, in love, quote unquote, and in perception. So that's what the whole Grey Lodge is about. It's about like living in the gray zone, if you want to call it that, because not the leftoids. I'm not talking about that. I just want to be clear. But I'm saying, like, maybe there's an interrelationship there, but it's kind of dancing at death is my idea. And so we kind of have to, keep going. And that's why, like, calling the spaces progressive in a way, because it's not that they're politically progressive, but they're progressive in that they're serialized. They kind of make sense as like as a trajectory. Like, we've went from one style to another, tried different things, talked about different things, had different people come on as speakers, but we've had thematic and sort of maybe structural elements that are continuous. So anyways, thank you all. And I'm going to do a room shout out, but the two boys are going to be able to give their final words, I promise. So thank you, Solar Exile, homeboy. And thank you, Dr. William Birkin, also homeboy. Also, next week, Matt is the I. Matt wanted the anyways, Matt said he would host the space, so I let him. He had the poster with his name, so I did that for him. So treat him with respect, and if you come, if you don't come, it's all flexible. Obviously, treat Solar and Joshua with the utmost respect. They are also the boss, and yeah, and be good to each other, and no drama, please. No one really does drama but me, but most just don't do it in general. Okay, John, our Astro Boy, thank you so much. Avi, Takini Queen, thank you. Moonblade, Sick Bro, thank you so much. Cassandra, content creator, thank you so much. Rom, Singaporean bro, will be in the same time zone in 3 days. Isn't that crazy? Blue Hour Bookery, thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate you. Really appreciate your support on the timeline and your DM. And I am so fascinated with what you do and what you post about. I think it's really incredible. I am a little bit of a bibliophile, so I know Solar is probably way more, but I just don't spend my money on those things. I'm just like very flexible. I was like, oh yeah, I'll have a PDF. That's fine. I'll have like 50 hard drives with PDFs. But yeah, okay. Thank you so much. Mookie, Crotakini, thank you so much, Logi. We really appreciate you. I'm glad to see you in the space today. I know you missed last too. For very legitimate and worthwhile reason. It's very flexible. But thank you so much for coming. And Hashasham? I don't know. But thank you so much for coming. I will follow you back. And everyone knows I can't speak Hebrew for shit. So I can't pretend now, right? I might as well just do it as bad as I actually do it in real life. So, and also dispels the rumors. Like the Groypers can never really come for me because I'm just so bad. Okay, anyways, moving on. Thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate you. And I'm glad. Welcome, and I hope that you enjoyed the space. Okay, Solar, and then Joshua. I'll let you, Joshua, close us out for real, for real. Okay, boys.
Yeah. I don't really have anything. Thanks for being here. And I really just wanted to underline something that Jin was saying earlier about bodhicitta being the sort of like foundation of view, so the Nirmanakaya of awareness, and that'll take you where you need to go. Not in a simple way, but in an endlessly unfolding and layered and deep way. It's a beautiful thing.
Awesome, amazing. I totally agree. It's infinite capacity. Infinite capacity. That's what it is. It's infinite capacity. I know it's very redundant what I'm doing or saying right now, but it's honestly, you cannot emphasize it enough. Loving kindness is enough. Can take you all the way. One thing you take away from any of these spaces, that's the one thing I would want you to take away. Even the dualities, non-duality. Yes, I think it's better to approach things in a middle pillar, non-dual way. But I understand that's not possible for everyone. But loving kindness is possible for everyone. So work on that. Yes, Joshua, please go ahead. Sorry, Joshua, please end us.
Once again, it's a pleasure to be here. I really enjoyed the topics tonight. If you wanted to check out any of the things I mentioned earlier about the cross symbolism, Messiah archetype, or just political stuff, current events, check out Channel KOK. I'm going to get around to making my channel soon, so I'll have a different one to use. But for now, that's where you can find a lot of the stuff I'm doing. And Sabbat Shalom. Oh, shout out to my friend Asher, and that's one of my buddies. So yeah, shout out to him and Blue Hours Bookery. I've been noticing you guys a lot on my timeline. Thanks.
Well, that concludes the Aeon of Psychic Youth, Arc Null. This is the Grey Lodge. I'm Jin the fucking Ninja. I host a show called Threshold Saints. This is Aeon of the Daughter, guys. It's fucking, we're in the pink ray. Like, let's fucking go with it. That's what I think. You can think whatever you want, whatever you will. I think love over will is really beautiful. I think the bow and arrow, if you don't know what the bow and arrow means, you should look that up. You should, don't use AI. You should look that up in tantric iconography. I'll give you a little hint. There's two specific deities, although there are many deities, that have a bow and arrow. There are two specific ones that are very prominent. Kurkula is obviously one. Rahula is the other. So maybe there's a secret meaning, a tantric meaning of an eclipse. And maybe also a rainbow. Because that's something that sometimes people see when they're having deep meditative / magical / NDE experiences. So we'll leave it at that. But do your sadhanas, do your prayers. If you want to be Christian, be Christian. That's fine. You want to be Jew, be Jew. I don't care. You want to be, hopefully you're not a Muslim, but if you are, I'll pray for you. Be a Sikh, follow the Dharma. That's what I think. I mean, I'm not a Sikh, but obviously follow Dharma, yes. And, I didn't do a room shout out. John, Avi, Moonblade, Cassandra, Rom, Blue. Oh, I did. Okay. Sorry. I got a little nervous. Mookie. Okay. Just sorry, guys. Okay. Well, that's it. So, have fun next week. If you choose to come, please do. I encourage you. Matt deserves it. He's an incredible content creator of his own, but he has a full-time real life job, and he can't commit to, doing it like hours and hours and hours a week. So right now he's taking a break, but next week he's the boss. So I told him, I said, you have complete creative control. Whatever happens, just make sure you tell Solar and Joshua like what you're doing and make sure that they say okay. But pretty much he has the reins. So let's see what happens. I think it'll be great. Honestly, I think he'll be really well behaved. But I told him, so anything can happen. You never know. So with that, good night. And thank you so much. And be in loving kindness with each other and with yourself as well. Like, not in a new age way, but in like a real way. Like, try and like think of the things that you even think in that sort of loving kindness framework. I think that's really interesting. So, okay. Good night, guys. Thank you so much.